I'm so sorry. I begged him to tell you.
Tell me what?
Your husband is the father of my baby.
This is the story of how I saved my husband from the bottom of his life and how, in return, he handed me the deepest betrayal I have ever known. Stay with me because by the end, I want you to understand something that took me far too long to learn myself, that saving someone does not obligate them to love you the right way. Sometimes, the very hand you extend to lift someone up is the hand they eventually use to push you down. My name is Ngozi, and 5 years ago, my life looked like something out of a dream I had worked very hard to build. I had spent nearly a decade climbing my way up in the corporate world, first as a junior accountant, then a supervisor, then finally, at 32 years old, a finance manager at one of the largest logistics companies in Lagos. It had not been easy. I had sacrificed sleep, social life, and more Friday nights than I could count, all in the name of building something stable, something mine. My husband, Tobenna, was a civil engineer, brilliant, genuinely brilliant, with a mind for structural design that impressed even his harshest professors back in university. We had met at a mutual friend's wedding 8 years earlier. And I remember, even now, how instantly drawn I was to how passionately he spoke about bridges and buildings, about creating things that would outlast both of us. We married 3 years into our relationship, and for the first several years, life was good. Not perfect. No marriage is perfect, my dear listener. And I will not sit here and pretend ours was some fairy tale untouched by disagreement or difficulty, but it was good. We were partners. We supported each other's ambitions. We laughed easily and we built a comfortable, respectable life together in a modest but lovely duplex in Lekki. Then, 4 years ago, everything shifted. The construction firm Tobenna worked for lost a major government contract due to circumstances entirely outside his control. A change in political administration, a reallocation of infrastructure budgets, the kind of thing ordinary working people rarely have any say over, yet always seem to suffer the consequences of. Within months, the firm began restructuring. And within that restructuring, my husband, along with nearly 40 other qualified, hardworking engineers, lost his job. My dear listener, I want to be completely honest with you about what those first few months of unemployment did to Tobenna, because I believe it matters deeply to the story I am about to tell you. He did not handle it well. Understand, Tobenna was a proud man, not arrogant, not boastful, but deeply, deeply proud. In that quiet way, many African men are raised to be the belief that a man's worth is directly tied to his ability to provide, to build, to be needed. And suddenly, without warning, that entire foundation of his identity was pulled out from under him. He applied to firm after firm. He attended interview after interview. Some never called back. Others offered salaries so insultingly low that accepting them would have felt like an admission of defeat. Month after month, I watched my confident, articulate husband slowly transform into someone smaller, someone who stopped talking about bridges and buildings, someone who spent long afternoons staring at nothing, someone whose laugh, once so easy, became something rare and forced. I never once made him feel less than because of it. I want you to understand that clearly, my dear listener, because it matters for everything that comes after. I covered our expenses entirely during those 2 years. I paid our rent, our bills, our groceries without complaint, without resentment, because that is what partnership means to me. I told him repeatedly, this is temporary. This does not define you. We will get through this together. But privately, quietly, I watched him wither. And there is a particular kind of heartbreak in watching someone you love disappear into their own shame, unable to reach them no matter how many times you extend your hand. It was during the second year of his unemployment that an opportunity arose within my own company, one I did not hesitate, even for a moment, to fight for on his behalf. My company was expanding its logistics infrastructure division and needed a project supervisor for a new warehouse construction initiative. Someone with structural engineering experience who could oversee contractors, ensure safety, compliance, and manage timelines. The position wasn't glamorous. It certainly wasn't the ambitious architectural career Tobenna had once dreamed of, but it was steady. It was respectable. And most importantly, it would pull him out of the suffocating silence that had swallowed him for 2 long years. I went directly to my managing director, a woman named Mrs. Adeyemi, who had mentored me since my early days at the company, and I made my case passionately. I vouched for my husband's qualifications, his work ethic, his genuine talent, everything I knew to be true about the man I had married before unemployment had dimmed his light. Mrs. Adeyemi, trusting my judgment completely, agreed to interview him. Tobenna performed brilliantly in that interview. Of course he did, because underneath all that accumulated shame and self doubt, his talent had never actually left him. It had simply been buried under months of rejection. He was offered the position within days. My dear listener, I remember that night so clearly. I remember Tobenna coming home, tears actually streaming down his face, this proud man who had not cried once during 2 entire years of unemployment, and pulling me into an embrace so tight I could barely breathe. You saved me, he whispered into my hair. I don't know how I will ever repay you for this. I told him gently that he owed me nothing, that watching him rebuild himself would be repayment enough. I had no idea, my dear listener, how those very words would come back to haunt me. The first year of Tobenna's new position went smoothly, beautifully even. He threw himself into the work with a hunger I hadn't seen in him for years, determined to prove himself worthy of the chance I had fought for. He earned the genuine respect of his colleagues. He received a promotion within 8 months. Slowly, painfully slowly, I watched my husband return to himself, confident again, engaged again, laughing easily again. I should have felt nothing but joy watching this transformation. And for the most part, I did. But there was a small, quiet part of me, the part every woman carries somewhere deep inside, the part that notices things before the conscious mind is ready to admit them, that began slowly to feel something shift. It started small. Tobenna began mentioning a colleague named Chiamaka more frequently in conversation. At first, it seemed entirely innocent. She was apparently sharp, funny, good at her job, someone he worked alongside frequently on coordination between departments. I actually knew Chiamaka myself. She worked in our marketing division and we had exchanged pleasant conversation at company functions over the years. She was, by every account, a genuinely likable woman, warm, stylish, quick, with a joke. I never suspected her. Why would I? She was, in many ways, someone I considered a work friend myself. But slowly, the mentions of her name increased. Tobenna began staying later at the office for project coordination meetings. He began receiving text messages that made him smile in a particular way, a way I recognized uncomfortably, because it was the same way he used to smile at messages from me back when we were newly dating, back before marriage had settled us into comfortable routine. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself 2 years of watching him suffer had made me hypersensitive, unable to simply enjoy his happiness without searching for hidden threats. I told myself that trust was the foundation I had built our marriage on, and I refused to become a woman who destroyed that foundation through baseless suspicion. My dear listener, how many of us have talked ourselves out of instincts that later proved painfully, devastatingly accurate? The truth came to me not through confrontation, not through detective work, not through catching them in some dramatic, cinematic moment. It came through a phone call from Chiamaka herself. It was a Wednesday afternoon, nearly 18 months after Tobenna started his new position, when my office phone rang and Chamaka's trembling voice came through the line, asking if we could speak somewhere private. I remember my stomach tightening immediately, some ancient instinct recognizing danger before my conscious mind could name it. We met in an empty conference room on the fourth floor. Chiamaka's eyes were red, swollen from what was clearly hours of crying. Her hands shook as she clutched a folded piece of paper I would later learn was a pregnancy test result. Ngozi, she said, her voice breaking completely. I need to tell you something, and I am so sorry. I am so, so sorry. My dear listener, I wish I could tell you I immediately understood what she was about to say. But some part of my mind, some protective, desperate part, refused to connect the pieces until she said the words directly. Tobenna and I have been having an affair for almost a year now. I'm pregnant, Ngozi. It's his. I want to be honest with you, my dear listener, about what that moment felt like because I think honesty matters more than drama in a story like this. I did not scream, I did not collapse, I did not, as they show in the movies, immediately begin sobbing or throwing accusations. My body in that moment simply went strangely, terrifyingly still, the way I imagine the ocean goes still right before a storm arrives. All that violence gathering silently just beneath a deceptively calm surface. How long? I finally managed to whisper, "Have you known you were pregnant?" 3 weeks, Chiamaka answered, tears streaming freely now. I told him immediately. I begged him to tell you himself. He kept promising he would find the right time, the right way. But 3 weeks became a month, and I couldn't carry this secret any longer. I couldn't look at you at the office anymore, knowing what I was doing to you. I asked her, my voice eerily calm even to my own ears, how it began. She told me, through broken sobs, a story that felt like watching my own marriage from some horrible, distorted mirror. Late nights working together on projects. Genuine friendship that slowly, gradually crossed lines neither of them intended to cross. A drink after a difficult work day that turned into something neither of them stopped. Secret meetings that continued month after month. Even as Tobenna came home every single night to me, kissed me goodnight, asked about my day, made love to me sometimes on the very same night he had been with her, hours earlier. My dear listener, I want you to sit with that detail for a moment because it is perhaps the part that broke something in me most completely. It was not simply the affair itself, as devastating as that was on its own. It was the sheer calculated normalcy of his deception, the ease with which he compartmentalized an entire secret life while still functioning as my loving husband every single day, without a single crack in his performance that I could detect. I drove home that evening in a fog I still cannot fully describe to you. I remember arriving at our duplex, seeing Tobenna's car already parked in the driveway, and sitting in my own car for nearly 20 minutes, simply staring at our front door, trying to summon whatever strength I would need to walk through it. When I finally entered, Tobenna was in the kitchen, humming softly while preparing dinner, a small domestic scene of a happy marriage that now felt like the cruelest kind of theater. "You're home early," he said, smiling before noticing my expression. "Ngozi, what's wrong?" "Chiamaka called me today," I said simply. I watched his face change in real time, watched the color drain from it, watched the smile collapse into something ashen and horrified, watched 20 years of careful, practiced composure crumble in the span of a single sentence. "Ngozi, I can explain. Is she pregnant?" The silence that followed answered the question more completely than any words could have. My dear listener, what followed over the next several hours was not the screaming match you might expect from television dramas. It was something quieter and, in many ways, far more devastating, a long, exhausting conversation filled with explanations that all somehow managed to sound both genuinely remorseful and utterly insufficient at the same time. Tobenna did not try to deny it once confronted directly. To whatever small credit remains available to him, he did not lie further, did not gaslight me into questioning my own reality, the way I have heard some men do in similar situations. He simply confessed peace by devastating peace to nearly a year of deception. He told me it began during a particularly difficult stretch when self doubt from his years of unemployment still lingered beneath his outward success. He told me Chamaka made him feel powerful, capable, desired in a way he felt he had lost during those 2 years of rejection. He told me, and my dear listener, this is the sentence that still echoes in my mind even now, that being with her did not feel like betrayal in the moment because it felt like reclaiming a part of himself he thought he'd lost forever. I asked him the question that mattered most to me in that moment. "Did you ever think about me?" about us, about everything I sacrificed to get you back on your feet. He wept then, genuinely, painfully, every single time he admitted, and I still couldn't stop myself. My dear listener, I share this detail not to make excuses for him because there are no excuses substantial enough to justify what he did, but because I believe understanding the psychology behind betrayal matters. If we are ever to protect ourselves and the people we love from similar wounds in the future. Tobenna's affair, as devastating as it was, did not emerge from nowhere. It emerged from an unhealed wound, the shame of unemployment, the fragile ego of a man who measured his worth through professional success and provision, seeking validation in the arms of someone new rather than doing the harder, more vulnerable work of healing that wound within our marriage. With me, the person who had already proven she would stand by him through his lowest moment. This does not excuse him. Let me be perfectly clear about that, my dear listener, because I never want this story to be misunderstood as sympathy for infidelity. But it does explain something important, that betrayal often grows not from a sudden absence of love, but from an unaddressed wound that festers quietly until it finds the wrong outlet for its pain. The days that followed were some of the most difficult of my entire life. I moved into my sister's guest room for nearly 3 weeks, unable to sleep in the same bed where I now understood so much deception had been quietly happening. I cried more in those 3 weeks than I believe I had cried in the previous 10 years of my adult life combined. I questioned every memory of our marriage, wondering which moments had been genuine and which had been performance. I questioned my own judgment, my own intuition, wondering how I had missed something so significant happening right beside me. But my dear listener, I also did something during those 3 weeks that I believe saved whatever remained of my own dignity and clarity. I sought counsel, not simply from friends and family, though their support mattered enormously, but from a therapist who helped me understand that Tobenna's betrayal was not evidence of my own inadequacy. It was not a reflection of anything lacking in me as a wife, as a woman, as a partner. It was a reflection of his own unresolved brokenness, and no amount of love or sacrifice from me could have prevented a wound he was unwilling to address honestly within himself. Tobenna, to his credit, did not fight my initial need for space. He did not pressure me, did not manipulate, did not attempt the kind of desperate reconciliation tactics I have heard other women describe from unfaithful partners. He simply waited, humbly, painfully aware of the magnitude of what he had destroyed. He also, importantly, immediately took financial and moral responsibility for Chiamaka's pregnancy, something I want to acknowledge, honestly, because it does matter, even amid everything else. He did not abandon her the way some men might, leaving her to face an unplanned pregnancy entirely alone, as some final act of cowardice layered atop his initial betrayal. He committed, regardless of what happened between us, to supporting his child financially and being present in that child's life. My dear listener, after nearly 2 months of separation, countless difficult conversations, individual therapy for myself, and couples counseling that Tobenna genuinely, earnestly participated in, I made the most difficult decision of my adult life. I chose to end our marriage. Not out of anger alone, though, anger was certainly present, not out of a desire for revenge or punishment. But out of a clear, sober understanding that I could not build the rest of my life on a foundation I now knew could be so completely hidden from me for an entire year, I could not raise a family eventually with a man whose deepest struggles he chose to hide behind deception, rather than share honestly with the very partner who had already proven, through years of unwavering support, that she was capable of standing beside him through anything. I want to be clear, my dear listener, that this was not an easy decision, and it was not one I made in haste or in the heat of initial betrayal. I genuinely, seriously considered reconciliation. Tobenna's remorse appeared authentic. His commitment to change appeared genuine. Our therapist believed the marriage could, with significant work, eventually heal. But something inside me, that same quiet, instinctive voice that had tried to warn me months earlier, told me clearly that even if I forgave him completely, even if I somehow found a way to trust him again eventually, I would spend the rest of our marriage unable to fully release the fear that another wound, hidden and unaddressed, might one day express itself the same devastating way. I finally realized a partnership built on complete honesty from its very foundation, not one requiring me to constantly monitor for the possibility of hidden betrayal. Our divorce was finalized 8 months after that devastating phone call from Chiamaka. It was, all things considered, remarkably amicable, given the circumstances, largely because Tobenna, to whatever credit remains available to him, never once contested my decision or attempted to make the process more painful than it already was. Today, nearly 2 years after our divorce, I have rebuilt a life I am genuinely quietly proud of. I received a significant promotion at my company shortly after our separation, perhaps in some strange way, channeling all that devastating emotional energy into professional focus. I have begun slowly, cautiously allowing myself to date again. Though I approach new relationships now with a wisdom I did not possess before this experience, a wisdom that understands love requires not just sacrifice and support, but complete, unwavering honesty, even when honesty is uncomfortable. Tobenna, from what I understand through mutual friends, remains employed at the same company, though he transferred to a different division to avoid ongoing complications with Chiamaka, who gave birth to a healthy baby girl. He is, by all accounts, an actively involved father. And I genuinely hope, for that innocent child's sake, that he has learned whatever painful lessons this entire experience was meant to teach him. My dear listener, before I let you go tonight, I want to share the lesson this experience taught me, the one I believe matters most for anyone listening who might be walking through something similar right now, or might simply want to protect their relationship from ever facing this kind of devastation. Sacrifice, no matter how generous, does not guarantee loyalty. I give Tobenna everything during his lowest moments, my financial support, my emotional strength, my professional reputation, vouching for him within my own company. And none of that ultimately was enough to prevent him from seeking validation elsewhere when his own internal wounds went unaddressed. This does not mean sacrifice is worthless or that we should love conditionally, calculating exactly how much effort we are willing to invest based on guaranteed returns. Love, real love, is never truly transactional in that way. But it does mean we must remember that we cannot heal another person's internal wounds simply through our own external effort. We can support, we can encourage, we can sacrifice generously, but ultimately, every person must do their own internal work of healing, shame, insecurity, and self doubt. And when they refuse that internal work, no amount of external support from us will be enough to protect the relationship from eventually cracking under that unaddressed weight. If you are currently pouring everything you have into rescuing someone you love financially, emotionally, professionally, please remember to also ask yourself honestly, are they doing the internal work required to heal alongside your external support? Because sacrifice without mutual healing often becomes eventually sacrifice without protection. So let me ask you, my dear listener, before you go tonight, because I always like to leave you with something worth carrying beyond my story. Have you ever poured everything you had into saving someone, only to watch them use that very restoration to hurt you in ways you never anticipated? And if you have, how did you find your way back to yourself afterward? I would love to hear your own experiences in the comments below, my dear friend. I read every single one, and I have found enormous comfort, even now, in hearing from others who have walked similarly difficult roads and found their way to healing on the other side. And if tonight's story reminded you of the importance of protecting your own heart, even while supporting the people you love, do me a favor. Like this video, subscribe to Jam Jam Tales, and share it with someone who might need the reminder tonight that they deserve honesty, not just effort truth, not just sacrifice. Until next time, my dear friend, give generously, but never forget to protect the part of yourself that generosity alone cannot heal.